Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. And hopefully, this is going to be a fairly short video. But I just want to talk a little bit about what we're doing this week. And what we're looking at, of course, is going to be Jean Genet. And the theme, right, of this next 2-week period, right, once we get through break, is Jean Genet and the idea of power, right? Power dynamics. And when we look at Jean Genet, and when we look at that PDF, again, we keep going back to the Martin Esslin PDF. It's a great PDF because I think it really helps us to get an idea outside of where, what my perspective is. But it helps us to get an idea of kind of what the differences are between Genet, Ionesco, Beckett, and what really helps us, I think, is first of all looking at Genet as the only, the only person who is born and raised, in France, right? Genet, sort of being a French, lifer, if you will, as opposed to Beckett, who is sort of a transfer in. Ionesco, who comes to France, of course, learns French as his first language, but then moves again right back to Romania and has those international and transcultural experiences. Genet is focusing on dynamics of power, and so what I can tell you is that you'll read in Esslin, right, that he's got 3 plays that are outside of the balcony. But we've got The Blacks, which is about as offensive as you can imagine, right? But in a way that you might not expect. The play that he writes basically involves an entirely black cast, often wearing white masks, right? Portraying a white group. And sort of the dynamics of power between, for lack of a better explanation, the colonizer and the colonized. He does this again with The Screens, which is a look at the French and Algerian relationship, and then also does it with a play called The Maids. And The Maids is sort of an interpersonal power struggle where we see 2 maids. We see their the people, the person that they're working for, and what it means to sort of have or not have or pretend to have power in a relationship with one another. And when we get to the balcony, we sort of come to the culmination of what Genet is trying to say about power structures. And we're going to see in the balcony, which I do recommend that you start before next week. I think it's a really important play to start and to sort of get into. It is an odd play. It takes place in a brothel, and it does deal with some very mature sexualized themes, but that dynamic between power and sex and the imagery of power is really phenomenal, I believe. When we look at Genet, though, where does this come from? Well, in the Esslin PDF, one of the things we see is that Genet is born. He is raised in France in difficult circumstances. He is raised in a very hard luck situation. He finds himself homeless very early. He discovers that he is a homosexual very early in life. This, of course, in France at the time, makes him a target of the police. He does become a prostitute for a while. He spends time in prison, both because of that and also because he is accused of theft. And when we read what Genet has to say about this time of his life, he talks about it in some very stark terms, saying that the very first time he's incarcerated for theft, he has done nothing. His very first incarceration, his very first arrest is incorrect. It's false. And he goes on to basically say that if people believed that I was a thief, well, then I was going to be one, right? I was going to then incarnate the role. If this is what they wanted me to be, I could do it, right? Yeah, I wasn't yet, but now I was sort of being told by society, this is what you are, I will do that. And so his perception of the way that people see him, and this idea of the dynamic of power, of seeing and believing, then extends throughout his writing and throughout his theater, throughout his novelizations, right? His actual prose writing, and never goes away, right? This idea of what we see and what is behind it is really, really complex. Now, as you can imagine, there are a lot of connections that we can make between this and between the absurd and between the and with existentialism, right? First of all, this idea that you are what you do. You are what you make yourself out to be. And Genet, at the beginning of his life, decides that if people are going to see him as something, then he is going to become that thing. He will do that thing, and that he will incarnate this. He truly believes in himself as a thief, as a prostitute. He believes in himself as a gay man, a queer man living in France, and is not ashamed of it. He does become exactly what people think he is going to be, and he owns it. And this makes him somebody that is a very distinct writer, because he is not afraid to write the things that he writes, whereas other writers might shy away from some of the topics. He dives right in. So what I'd like you to do, number one, have an excellent Thanksgiving break, whatever it is that you are doing. Number two, make sure that you are turning in your drafts for your final paper. That way I can take a look at them throughout break as much as I can and into next week, so that we can have some feedback and make the end of the semester go as smoothly as possible, and start reading a little bit of Genet's The Balcony. I believe it's an excellent play. It's an odd play, but I believe that the look at the power dynamics and what we're going to talk about with the power dynamics is going to be really, really fascinating. So have a great break. I wish you all the best, and do come back safely after break.